All right, I'm going to go ahead and call to order this meeting of the Santa Barbara Unified School District Board of Education for Tuesday, August 12th, 2014. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. Cash.
Please stand. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Buenas tardes, soy Rafael Santana. Si alguna persona necesita el aparato para escuchar la interpretación de esta junta, con gusto lo atenderemos aquí atrás por las puertas dobles. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. And we do have headsets available for the hearing impaired. If you need that, you can find that at our side table here. Dr. Cash, item C5, introductions, proclamations, presentations, or recognitions.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Hopefully, we have 3 new people. I'm going to introduce 2 right now. First, I'd like to acknowledge Alex Sheldon. Alex, would you please stand? Alex Sheldon, this summer, was appointed the Dean of Students at San Marcos High School. We all know Alex. He's been a successful teacher in our district, and he was also instrumental in making the Entrepreneurship Academy at San Marcos High School a reality, and we welcome him as a new member of our district leadership team. We know he'll do a great job as the Dean at San Marcos High School. Welcome, Alex. I'd also like to introduce Veronica Binkley, who was appointed this summer. Veronica, please stand, as the new principal of Harding University Partnership School. Veronica is new to our district, so I'll tell you a little bit about her. She has a master's in education administration, a BA in child development. She's been an assistant principal. She has extensive experience in the International Baccalaureate program, primary years program in particular, and taught elementary school for many, many years. Veronica will do an excellent job at Harding, and welcome to our leadership team.
Pleasure.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
And I'll discuss one other new individual in just a moment.
And that brings us to the superintendent's report.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I have to interrupt the celebration with a sad report. Last night, La Colina Junior High School student Sebastian Holzer, a soon-to-be 8th grader, tragically lost his life. La Colina Principal David Ortiz said that Sebastian took honors courses, had great grades, demonstrated exemplary behavior, was very friendly, and had tremendous potential. Sebastian's avid teacher described him as, quote, an easygoing, mellow, friendly guy. He was a peacemaker who didn't ask much for himself. He was always upbeat and didn't ever have anything negative to say. Sebastian was really a terrific boy with a smile I will always remember, end quote. I'd like us all to please join in one moment of silence to recognize the tragic loss of Sebastian Holzer, his brother, and his mother and father. Counseling support will be available for students and staff immediately, and we'll continue that counseling support when school starts on August 27th.
And just to clarify, Dr. Cash, he lost his grandparents.
Yes, right, I'm sorry, his grandparents, excuse me. On Thursday and Friday of this week, the district's administration team will be meeting for our annual 2-day leadership charge training, and we have a lot of work next week. Our teacher orientation day, as well as our professional development day, will take place next week, and that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Cash. Board, comments and correspondence?
I had the pleasure of going to the Autism Beach Party this past Saturday, and it was just great. All I can say is just a great experience to see the families and the kids. The parents were more excited with their kids out in the ocean than the kids were. The kids were really excited, but the parents were absolutely ecstatic. And I've been going around and watching the different construction projects, and thank you, public, for giving us the bonds. But I knew that Veronica was a tiger, but boy, Harding School is just torn up like mad. I mean, it's really a destruction zone there, so you really turn things around, and it's going to be great. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Paz.
I think we could say it's official that we should congratulate our fellow board members, President Kate Parker and my fellow board member Monique Limon, who will be on our board for another 4 years. So I want to thank them.
Thank you very much. If no other comments or correspondence, we're going to move on to the announcement of closed session action. We had a pretty long agenda for closed session today. We will be taking action on items B1 and B2 on readmission of expelled students and student discipline a little bit later in the meeting. One item that we did take action on in closed session was item B6. And that was the public employee appointment. The description of the title to be filled was the Director of English Language Learners and Parent Engagement Programs. It was moved by Mr. Herron and seconded by Dr. Paz to appoint Raul Ramirez as the Director of English Language Learners and Parent Engagement Programs. And that vote was aye by Limon, Paz, Herron, and Parker, and no nays, and Ms. Idelson is absent. And with that, he is our new Director of English Language Programs, English Language Learners and Parent Engagement Programs. And Dr. Cash, I don't know if you have an opportunity to introduce him.
I do. Dr. Ramirez, please stand. We're really excited to have Dr. Ramirez join us as a member of our leadership team. I'll tell you a little bit about Dr. Ramirez. Dr. Ramirez has a doctorate from the University of Southern California. That was not a prerequisite. He's been an elementary principal. He was an assistant principal at a high school. He's taught English in Los Angeles. He has extensive experience overseeing instructional programs, planning and coordinating staff development programs, working with English learners, and very importantly, he has had a lifelong work in English language and English language development. And I believe it's all of those qualifications that makes him uniquely suited to be our Director of English Learner and Parent Engagement Programs, and he will start tomorrow. So we are excited to have him. Welcome, Dr. Ramirez.
And thank you and welcome. We're very excited about that. And I have a feeling that you have a lot of parents in the room right now that would probably want to grab you before you go anywhere. And I think we may need to take a short break. Is it correct that our Spanish translation headsets are not working? They're not working? So we can pause for a couple of minutes and see if we can get those working. So I'm going to go ahead and just schedule a short recess.
English learner programs and parent engagement programs. Dr. Ramirez has a doctorate from USC. He's currently, his last assignment was as an elementary principal. He's been an assistant principal at a high school, taught English language development, two key instructional areas for him. He has experience overseeing instructional programs, planning and coordinating staff development, and importantly, I've learned he's a lifelong learner. And we're excited to have him start as our new Director of English Learner and Parent Engagement Programs. And I said earlier, he starts tomorrow, which we can't wait. So either tomorrow or Thursday.
No, it's tomorrow.
Tomorrow. I love it. That's great. And again, welcome, Dr. Ramirez. We're so excited to have you join our leadership team. Thank you.
And may I ask right off the bat for members of the public, how do we contact Dr. Ramirez? Is it R. Ramirez?
R. Ramirez at sbunified.org.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you.
See you tomorrow.
And that brings us to public comments on non-agenda matters within jurisdiction of the Board of Education. Do we have any public comment?
No.
All right. That brings us to DA, the acceptance of donations.
I move to accept with gratitude.
Second?
All those in favor? Aye. That passes unanimously with Ms. Idelson absent. And I'm going just to note that she will not be here for the entire meeting, so I'll keep reporting that it's a unanimous 4-0 vote, but I'm not going to keep reiterating that Ms. Idelson is absent. Let's move on to the consent agenda. Any items that need to be pulled? Then may I have a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second?
It's moved by Ms. Limon, seconded by Mr. Herron. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that passed unanimously 4-0. We do have a public hearing coming up, but it is time certain for 7:30, so we will come back to that at the appropriate time. So we are going to move on to the action agenda. G1, this is the board action on petitions for readmission of expelled students, and we have 3. Mr. Herron?
I will move that we admit 3 expelled students with cases number 2012-13-18, 2012-13-23, 2012-13-26.
I will second that.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously 4-0. And then G2, board action on student discipline case number 2013-14-26.
I will move for the stipulated agreement in case number 2013-14-26 for 1 school year expulsion ending January 2015.
I will second that.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? That passes unanimously 4-0. And then we have item G3. This is approval of new classified job description, videographer editor. Dr. Cash.
Would like Dr. Christensen to come forward, and she'll present this item.
Good evening. For several years, the district has hired a videographer on an as-needed basis to do several things, not the least of which is to film our board meetings, to film classroom sessions, and also special events such as the recent Night of Stars Employee Recognition Evening. The duties indeed have become regular enough to justify creating a part-time classified position. If you approve adding this position, it will be posted and we will interview and hire for the job. So in conclusion, recommend that the Board of Education approve the videographer job description as presented this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Christensen. Any questions, board members? May I have a motion?
I will move to approve the new classified job description for videographer editor part-time.
Second.
All right, it's moved by Ms. Limon and seconded by Dr. Paz. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passed unanimously 4-0. G4, this is selection of finalist for site development for a senior living facility at the Tatum site and authorization for the superintendent to negotiate a contract for presentation to the board for final approval. Dr. Cash.
Thank you very much, Madam President. As board members are aware, a request for proposals was released inviting proposals for the development of a senior housing project on the district's property that's euphemistically known as the Tatum property. An interview committee was convened. A board member was present. President Parker was on the committee. And the committee listened to presentations by 2 proposals and then asked a series of questions, both structured questions to both groups and then questions that were prompted by both proposals. The purpose of the interview was to select a finalist to bring forward to the board so that the board could authorize the superintendent to begin negotiating with that finalist. If approved, I would anticipate that I would be developing an exclusive negotiating agreement with Vintage Tobes, which is the recommended finalist, which I would then bring back to the board for the board's approval. That agreement would provide a time frame for each party to take the steps needed before any further definitive agreement is reached and to negotiate the terms of that further agreement. I would also anticipate that we would ask Vintage Tobes to come back perhaps as early as the next board meeting and make a presentation regarding their proposal and their project. I'll speak for myself, not on behalf of the committee. Madam President can speak for her perception, but I thought the process went really well. We had two great proposals to pick from, and it was the committee's clear choice to pick the Vintage Tobes Group.
Thank you, and yes, I'll reiterate that it was a great process, really informative, and Vintage Tobes was extremely impressive. Questions? Dr. Paz?
Was there anything that stood out in that proposal that you would like to let us, that we're not part of the process?
Sure. From my perspective, I think the single most important thing was how well they responded to our request for proposals. When I looked at our rubric, which was included in the request for proposals, and went down and looked at how did they respond to all of those, the Vintage Tobes group did an outstanding job. The other group did as well, but that's what, from my perspective, delineated the two.
Ms. Simon?
In terms of, I'm guessing this may have been somewhere or alluded to in the rubric of sorts, but in terms to their ability to think about space, potential space for students or for school site use, can you comment on that, since that is one idea that's been thrown out?
Yeah, that was part of the rubric in the request for proposals, clearly, and both groups discussed it. The group that we're recommending discussed it in great detail and had a number of ideas.
So they were also able to present additional ideas besides the ideas that had surfaced at one time?
That is correct.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. Herron?
I'm just curious, in the RFP, it's indicated that today it would come back with review of qualifications and proposals. Not having seen it, it's hard to vote to go ahead with something. Is there any reason why we didn't have a sort of a presentation like you were mentioning we might have at the next meeting? It just seems strange that we haven't seen the document or seen the proposal or know anything about it.
And when I looked at it, it's because though this is the way I interpreted it, maybe because Dr. Cash can clarify further. This is essentially further negotiations, and so I'm not sure that it's appropriate at this point to have everything out on the table since it's still in negotiations. This is not our final approval. This is just a next step in the negotiating process. And Dr. Cash?
Yeah, that's 100% correct, Madam President.
Ms. Simon?
And in terms of the process as it goes forward, I mean, this is an area with a lot of neighbors. So is there any vetting that happens as far as, I don't know if it's ratings or comments of sorts, just to also know that they are a firm that is able to work with a variety of neighbors who probably already have opinions about the property as a sort.
Well, I can tell you that as I've shared with board members, the interview committee consisted of staff, board president, council, and an expert. And there was significant research done prior to the presentations of the two presenting firms.
And that was absolutely part of the rubric was how clear were they about how clear they were going to be, how open, transparent, what the communication was going to be with neighbors, and the process that they envisioned for that. So that was a direct part of the rubric. Mr. Herron?
How much public input will take place before we vote on granting them the right to do this? I mean, it's nice to have public after we grant it, but will the public have any right to look at it before we grant it?
Well, that would be your decision as a board.
So
Ms. Simon?
as far as the timeline, though, and thinking about our options, at what point could we solicit public? I mean, you wouldn't solicit public input on selecting the firm as much as you would on the proposal, or
Well,
what would it?
I wouldn't know that input on the proposal would be what we would want to solicit. What we're going to want is input on the project.
Input on the project,
Right.
excuse me. So input on the project, and that comes can you describe a timeline for me?
Well, there won't,
Potential.
I mean, the months. is what I would say from now. There's a number of steps that have to take place before the actual project is defined. I mean, they have submitted a proposal, they have given us ideas, we certainly had ideas. Now, I hope maybe we'll be in the process of beginning to formally discuss what that's going to look like, what our relationship is going to look like, what they're going to be able to do in response to the property, and what our financial needs might mean in exchange for that. Those are all things that will be happening down the road at this particular point.
And in terms of things like design and so forth, that would be, I mean, not just communication here, but in the county, in the county approval process, it'll be huge, yeah. Mr. Herron?
Well, it just sounds like we're going to make a decision without any public input, and then after the decision is made, we'll get public input. It just seems it would be a general description of what the proposal is, not the details, not the nuts and bolts, but at least to give some view for what the vision is.
What would you like to see accomplished?
I was hoping to see at least a visualization of what we're talking about, just like the gentleman that came to the meeting, a couple months ago.
You did see that. It's that group that was selected.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Well, that helps
So the
me a lot.
public has seen it.
I thought, because Tobes wasn't involved in that.
Not at that time, it was not.
Okay, that's what threw me off, because Tobes, and I know Tobes, I mean, he's a great developer, so I'm very happy. So if that is the proposal,
It is.
oh, then I'm satisfied. I've seen enough.
But keep in mind that what you've seen was super preliminary and is
Yes.
not at all what the, final project would look like. Dr. Paz?
And I was going to comment on that because that presentation presented some open space on the western end of the property, which, based on the development process with the county,
Yes.
may change.
Well, it will. I've walked that path. It's a
Yeah.
pretty nice path they built there.
Yeah. Just for the public, that is on one of our agendas. I can't tell you what date it was, but anybody in the public who wants to look at that broad description of a project,
Probably ask.
it is on our site, and
And we will see that. Are they going to be able to come to the next meeting, do we know?
I certainly hope so. He's nodding his head yes.
Okay.
He will be here in 2 weeks.
All right, so if they can be here in 2 weeks, then you'll see, again, it would be very preliminary, but, some preliminary ideas of what they were
Good.
looking at. All right, so,
I would like to move on the selection of finalists for site development for a senior living facility at the Tatum site and authorization for the superintendent to negotiate a contract for presentation to the board for final approval.
second.
I just want to be really clear because the recommendation is for the selection of VinCal, Senior Housing, and the Tobes Group, Inc., just to make sure that that's explicit in the motion. So if that is understood?
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and that passed unanimously 4-0. Thank you. And we'll look forward to seeing that in 2 weeks. I'm still just double checking the time. Item G5, this is denial of developer fee refund request for 1123 Manitou Road. Dr. Cash.
Mr. Hetjunk.
Thank you, Dr. Cash, Madam President. We received a written protest for a developer fee. The code basically says if you want to protest the fee, you have to pay the fee and then notify the board in writing of your protest. Scott Hansen did that, addressed a letter to President Parker. We turned it over to legal counsel. Legal counsel did their investigation review and their recommendation, and that is in the supporting documents of the agenda item.
Thank you,
And
Mr.
legal counsel recommends denial.
Okay. Board comments or questions on this? Do we have any public comment on it? No? If you would like to speak on it, you can go ahead. Just for our records, it'd be great if you could just put a note with your name on it. There's probably a...
Barbara, can you show them where the
cards
speaker
are?
forms are?
And you can give that, you can go ahead and speak and just give that to us afterwards. Yeah. Just let us know what your name is as you come up to the mic.
Good evening. My name is Matt Layden. I'm representing Scott Hansen here, and I'm a local attorney, but I'm mostly his friend, and he asked me to take a look at the legal opinion letter, and I saw some glaring flaws in the letter that yeah, you're probably going to rely on to make your decision. So let me just get to the three conclusions that she gets to, and right to the fact of it. And she talks about the timeliness based upon the notice and saying the 90-day window had shut and that he wasn't entitled to make the request for a refund. She makes a mistake because she doesn't look at the correct receipt and find out that the February 27, 2014 date that she supplies or actually, I'm sorry, she supplies a November 13th date, but the actual date is the 27th of February. The request with the letter that I have here made by Mr. Hansen for the refund was done then on May 23rd, 2014, which is within that 90-day window. So her first conclusion and her justification to deny it, the timeliness, is incorrect because she uses the wrong date. The second issue that she comes up with and she makes is that the claim is unsubstantiated, which is indicating that the proper paperwork hasn't been filed and that he hasn't indicated all of the details. The reason for that is that Mr. Hansen just wasn't aware of everything that he was supposed to provide. I have all that documentation here with me now so that you can take a look at it and see what the exact numbers are, the details, the dates, and all of that information. The third point that she makes is says that it's unsupported by the law, but she gives no indication anywhere within the opinion to support this conclusion. It's basically talking about the timeliness and the lack of detail, which is what she bases her denial or her suggestion and opinion on.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Questions at this point? Mr. Herron?
Has any of what you just said been reported to us in writing?
No, I'm sorry. Like I said, I'm a friend of Mr. Hansen's. He just asked me to look at this, and I've been out of town on business, so I just got back into town, but I'm more than happy to provide you with a written explanation of all of that. I brought the paperwork with me and went through the letter, but that's the extent of what I have to provide today.
Do we have any sort of deadline that we need to meet in terms of responding to this request, Dr. Cash?
No.
Okay. Board members, do you want to take action, or do you want to continue it to another agenda?
I'd like to give the applicant time to give this response and have it reviewed, mainly because of the one factual error of the date, if that in fact is a factual error.
Sure.
But I'd like to at least have the opportunity to see how that would affect the opinion.
Yeah. And I'm happy to do that as well, to have it come forward on a future agenda. I can say that one key point that I would want to see how this is addressed is the idea of it was the previous property owner who paid the fees, and the idea that you could somehow do get a refund of the difference.
Right.
Since Mr. Hansen didn't get the first amount or wasn't the one that paid the first amount of money.
Right.
And we don't need to go into that discussion right now, but just be aware that probably that alone would be a vote on my end to deny the request.
I understand.
So I would want to see that addressed.
Great.
All right? All right, so we'll have that come forward on a future agenda.
Great, thank you very
And
much.
we'll let you know when that is. Thank you. And then item G6, approval of energy audit agreement for Proposition 39, energy conservation and energy efficiency services.
We'll invite David Hetjunk back to the podium. Invite David Hetjunk back to the podium.
Thank you, Dr. Cash, members of the board. There were concerns with the last proposal over what future contractual obligations the district may have with NORESCO, and I believe that the current contract has eliminated those concerns. It is a contract just for the energy audit, and once we have the audit complete, we can do as we wish with the information.
Board members?
Dr. Cash, are you happy with the new agreement?
We had We had it reviewed by legal counsel. I think it addressed the two issues that I heard, which were, one, who owns the intellectual property, and two, whether this was sort of a two-phase total agreement. And I think it's clear that this is one agreement, and that we own the intellectual property.
And also what brought the whole thing up was the addition of sexual orientation, and I see we used the district's version of the proper wording.
I used what Dr. Christensen provided.
Yeah, so I appreciate that very much, because that was far more in line with our process. So, I mean, those three things were my concern, and it looks like they were taken care of.
And legal counsel has also made the same changes for all of the charters, should they wish to include that in their agreements.
Adelante approved it last night, subject to our action tonight. Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Herron, would you like to make a motion?
I will make the motion that we approve the energy audit agreement for Proposition 39, energy conservation and energy efficiency services.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Herron and seconded by Dr. Paz. All those in favor? Aye. That passes unanimously 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. And it's now 7:06, and we'll move to H1, the first reading of Board Policy 0410, non-discrimination in district programs and activities. Dr. Cash.
Well, both H1 and H2 are board policies and administrative regulations that we think we would hope that the board would help us get settled so that we could have them done prior to the start of the school year. And so that's why you're seeing them tonight. And Mr. Torina is going to handle both H1 and H2. So we'll ask Mr. Rickman to put up H1 for the public.
Madam President and Board, as new and revised federal regulations in California Ed Code become law, and when legal cases affect board policies, the CSBA, California School Boards Association, provides our district with updated samples of new and/or replacement policies. The Series 00 covers the topic of philosophy, goals, and objectives, and comprehensive plans, and attaches a summary of the changes for the board policy 0410. It's recommended that the Board of Education review the revisions to the board policy in non-discrimination and in district programs and activities, and provide feedback to staff for second reading.
Any thoughts on this particular one? No? Ms. Limon?
I just have a quick question. Page 2 of 3, top line. There we go. So that 15%, is that our district practice, or is that
That's law.
Law. Ed Code. Thanks.
I only have a suggestion in the very first sentence, actually, and that is where it says, the governing board is committed to providing equal opportunity for all individuals in education. Because education is such a broad term here, I would actually suggest that we change it to the governing board is committed to providing equal opportunities for all individuals, and then just put a period there. Because I don't want us to be, to think of sports and, extracurriculars and stuff, and not, it's broader than education, and I think that the CSBA could have done a little bit better than that.
So inclusive of all opportunities.
Yes, so just to
Without limiting it
providing
to the
equal
education.
opportunities for all individuals.
Okay, so noted.
Any objections to that? Any other language suggestions? Can this come forward on consent? Consent for the second reading, please.
Great.
And this is now H2, the selected board policies and administrative regulations in the 5000 series.
So there are a number of policies, board policies and administrative regulations that we're going to be looking at. All of them are in the Series 5000 that covers the topic of students. Again, it's the recommendation of the California School Board Association to provide us with the updated samples of their replacement policies.
Did anybody have any suggested revisions or changes? This was specifically on 5131.62 tobacco, and then the BPs and ARs on 5144 discipline and 5144.1 suspension and expulsion due process. If I can go to a specific place if there is specific language that anybody wanted to modify. No? All right, then with that, we will go ahead and see these on the consent agenda at our next meeting as well.
You guys are,
Thank you.
you must have been in the Evelyn Wood speed reading course.
Well,
after the
we all
last
spent our
board meeting.
time. We all spent our time, and I think that the CSBA has done a nice job on that. These are sort of straightforward. There are other things that are more controversial.
And it's helped that we've been reviewing them regularly, so they're not particularly brand new to us.
This brings us to item H3, an update on the Quetzal program. Dr. Cash.
Well, as board members are aware, it was a little over 15 months ago that the district was informed that El Puente would be closed. And we were given approximately 30 to 45 days to create the most appropriate place for our students. Fran Wagenek had just been named the principal at La Cuesta Alta Vista and was given the opportunity to create a new program called Quetzal, which she and her staff named. And we promised we'd bring back a summary of our first year, and Fran is here to do that. And I want to publicly acknowledge the great work that Fran has done in her first year as principal of our continuation school. She's just done an outstanding job.
Thank you, and I also want to remind the board that I will stop any discussions at 7:30.
Well, I am glad to be here now 15 months later and be able to report on year one. I have mentioned this to a number of folks that if we had been a business, we wouldn't have opened on August 26th, but we were close, and we went ahead and opened up, and it was only, it's really important to note that this was a district effort to get Quetzal up and going. We really felt the support of district office in doing what needed to be done, no matter what, in order to open up. One thing a year ago when I came and presented to you regarding the plan for Quetzal was that we would have placement criteria, and we felt very strongly that it was important that we stuck to that we had a vision of Quetzal of being a place where students would come in and it would be a place for them to transition, and then we would be able to look at where the next steps were for each student. We have stuck with that placement criteria, and we have held monthly meetings the first Thursday of every month. It's comprised of an assistant principal from each of the traditional high schools, the assistant principal of La Cuesta and Alta Vista, representative from district special ed, and probation have been a part of that team, and we come together monthly to look at students who are coming into Quetzal for placement purposes. We really kind of vet that and make sure that we're staying true to the vision, and we've done that. We often get, in fact, more and more often, we're getting phone calls from parents and advocates wanting to have students placed into Quetzal, and we go ahead and refer those back to the traditional high schools to go through the process. As you know, Quetzal are community-based classrooms. We started the year last year with 4 sites, one in Goleta at the CAC offices, one at La Colina, one at east side at La Casa de la Raza, and one on the west side at the West Side Neighborhood Center. For various reasons, most of them based on what was best for the students and their education, we combined the La Colina and the Goleta site, and turn that into one site. And that has proven, we did that at the semester, and that's proven to be a very good decision for a number of reasons. Most of all, and this was a huge consideration, was that with the La Colina site originally was just a special ed campus. Well, those students were not being served. Their general education needs were not being served. So now we're able to do co-teaching and inclusion, and it's a much better situation. I want to talk about the school day. We did serve junior high school students, and we'll look at the statistics in just a moment. So we have junior high students. All of our junior high students attend the La Colina campus, and then that's from 8:30 to 2:30. We do late start on Thursdays. And then the high school is a blend of direct instruction and independent study. They do direct instruction with the teachers in the morning and then do independent study in the afternoon. We're really tweaking this part of our program right now, trying to strengthen the afternoon independent study program. We have an agreement currently with Youth Interactive. I just met with a representative who was recommended to me by the Orfalea Foundation to start a horticulture program in conjunction with Youth Interactive. We have the Museum of Art coming in, independent study, their Odysseyware online coursework, and then because they're doing independent study, they're required by law to have a weekly one-to-one meeting with their teacher. So that goes on in the afternoon too, and that's a great opportunity for the students to really get that 1 hour of individual attention from their teacher. We began last year doing the blended learning, direct instruction, online courses, and then we piloted some project-based learning. The one big project-based learning piece that we did was they studied Hearst Castle, and it culminated in an actual trip to Hearst Castle, which was fantastic. Next week, on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we have the Buck Institute coming in to do training on project-based learning. All of the Quetzal teachers, as well as the Alta Vista Independent Study teachers, 4 La Cuesta teachers, will be joined by teachers from the 3 traditional high schools. We have 35 total who are coming together in teams to participate in that, and we're really excited about the project-based learning piece. For me, it was a way to really make that jump to the Common Core for our students, and so we're excited to see that. And then students will use the online courses to fill in the gaps where they're missing credits, and then of course the face-to-face instruction with their teacher. We knew we couldn't do this without the community, and so these are the community partnerships we currently have. Of course, the City of Santa Barbara, because we receive use of the classroom there, and in return, the only thing we pay is that we promise to use the facilities. So that's where the horticulture piece comes in. We're developing that. That's kind of year 2. That's a big piece of what we're doing, ultimately getting into the kitchen and using that. La Casa de la Raza, of course, we are partnering with them, and I'd like to say in terms of La Casa de la Raza, it wasn't just the fact that we were tenants in the room. Our students increasingly got more and more involved, and they were frequently invited to participate in arts events that were going on at La Casa, as well as other events, and we expect that to just continue to grow. We have the Museum of Art going in a couple days a week for instruction. Community Action Commission initially worked with us by providing the space for the classroom in Goleta. We now have referred 90% of our students, it's a little over 90% of our students to the CalGrip, so they're receiving CalGrip services, and we're part of that, and it's CalGrip's being studied by Jill Sharkey at UCSB. An extension of that this year with CAC is going to be, they're going to come in and do a drug education program as part of CalGrip, so we're continuing, and that's a really robust partnership with that group. Of course, we work with probation and also transitional youth services for homeless and foster youth. We're working with Youth Interactive on bringing the entrepreneurial piece in and as part of our career technical. And then finally, one big breakthrough that I'm very excited with, and I've worked with, Mitch is smiling. We have worked with County Mental Health, and we'll be screening every student who comes into Quetzal. Not assessing, but screening for mental health services, and then referring to the Children's Services of County Mental Health to get students the counseling and assistance that they need. And that's a really big piece. That's also in conjunction with probation. So, okay. A little bit of data. We served 89 students last year. 7 of them were in junior high, 82 in high school. You can see, as would be predicted, overwhelmingly male students, but we did serve 20 girls. 16 of the students were on expulsion, 44 were referred from probation. 95% of those referred from probation came out of Los Prietos. 24 were referred for truancy, and the way that worked was it came out of the SARB process, and as students were referred to SARB, the assistant principals would bring them to the educational placement team meeting and recommend them, or during the SARB meeting, Quetzal would come up as an option, and then we would follow through. The average number of days enrolled was 80. We did a little bit of a credit analysis here. The average number of credits for students who were there 90 days, so one semester, was 22.2. Now, we're always shooting for 30 or more credits per semester, so that's something we're going to be working on. But what we do see here is that the highest number of credits earned by a student who was in Quetzal for 90 days was 38.5. So the potential is there. The low was 0, so really the piece I'm lacking here is the mean. But that's a good sign that we're offering students the opportunity to earn credits and recover credits. I wanted to compare and just let you look at what we were doing with special education students. We served in total of 24. Anywhere between 10 and 14 students throughout the year was kind of the caseload we were carrying there.
Can I ask a quick question about that?
Yes,
Sure.
Ms.
Is
Limon.
that 24 out of the 89 or 24 in addition to the 89?
Out of the 89.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So 24 out of the 89 were special ed students. 6 of those were junior high school students. All but 2 of our 8 junior high school students were special education students. And I believe, and I would have to go back and look, I think 5 out of our 6 junior high school students were on expulsion, and 1 came out of the camp. So those are numbers for special education. And I want to finally talk about transitions. One thing I found with Quetzal, we always talked about this being a short-term program. 9 weeks, a semester, unless students were on expulsion. We really saw it as a transition, and they would move on. What we found was a lot of students wanted to stay. They wanted to stay at Quetzal, and we kind of had to drag them kicking and screaming out. They didn't know that we could offer them things, perhaps at La Cuesta primarily, that they also had at Quetzal. So most of the students who were transitioned out did go to La Cuesta and were not unhappy once they were there. So that's the good news. The good news also is that they did not want to leave Quetzal when given the opportunity. Yes. One girl at La Cuesta told me she was going to purposefully do poorly so that we would send her back to Quetzal, but she's still at La Cuesta. We also have referred a number to Alta Vista Independent Study. We had one young man come in today who did very well at Quetzal last year, and he liked the feel of the La Colina campus, and he'll be going to Alta Vista next semester. Some do transition back to their traditional high schools. One thing, I'd be remiss not to say that we did see students going in and out of incarceration, and they were always welcome back. It was difficult, because for many of those students, they were doing well in school, they were showing up, but they were evidently not doing as well on the outside. So that was hard for the teachers, hard for the students, but the good news is their spot was always there for them to return to. And then the transition that we've tried to prevent, and that's our ultimate goal, is the dropouts. We were not successful with several students who were truants, but what we did see with a number of our truants was that Quetzal got them back into the habit of going to school, and then once they were in the habit of going to school and connected, then they would transition and be successful. We have one young man who had been truant from 2 years at Dos Pueblos, most of the year in 11th grade at La Colina, and then in 12th grade he was in Quetzal. He was one of our original students. He transitioned back to La Cuesta at the semester, and he just finished 3 classes in summer school. So he has another year. He'll take a 5th year to graduate, and he'll be at La Cuesta. But he's an example for me of why we never give up on students. We never give up, because we don't know when that light switch for them is going to go on, and it's different for every single kid. So we do have, year one, I think, considering the obstacles we had to overcome and trying to adjust things throughout the year, I would say all in all it was a successful year, that we met the goals that we set. And so now we have new goals for year 2, and I'm very, very hopeful. Questions from you all? Or?
Thank you. Board members. Ms. Limon?
So I think in one of your slides, your earlier slides, you talked about team teaching, and I just wanted to get more information, because I remember visiting the West Side site really early on, and at that time there was one teacher there, and 9:30 to 2:30 or 2 or whatever it was, with no lunch. I just kind of want to get a feel for how the team teaching is work and the logistics of what sounded at the time as possible concerns of not having a facility that, like a school where there was a break and a restroom and all those pieces. So if you could just speak to that a little bit.
So the team teaching takes place only at La Colina. The La Casa and Westside Neighborhood Center teachers do teach independently, and that was one reason why that was probably the biggest struggle, and I'm glad that you addressed that, was these folks were working in isolation. We were at La Casa able to fund a 6-hour-a-day aid, and that helped immensely. We'll be funding an aid at the West Side this year as well, but also the structural change. So they go to school from 8:30 to noon, have a half-hour lunch break. This is the change for this coming year. Last year, at the semester, we made a switch where they would go to school till 11:30, then they were done, and then they would come back for independent study. That did not work out because, and this is the kind of teenager I was, if I had 45 minutes and I was expected to come back, I often would not. And so we found we have to put some parameters in there. So we've restructured it so that they do the instruction, they have lunch there on site, and then following that, they do independent study, and we're bringing the community members in to work with the students on the horticulture, youth interactive, et cetera. We have Partners in Ed coming in. That was a community group I didn't list. Apologize. And then the teacher will be doing their one-on-one meetings. So we think we've restructured it so those teachers who are working in isolation are not as isolated and have more support.
All right, thank you. And at this point, I'm going to pause our questions and comments, but don't go anywhere, Ms. Wagenknecht, because we have to have a time-certain public hearing at 7:30, and I'm going to open and close it in a moment, and then we will adopt our resolution. So at this point, I am going to open our public hearing on the adoption of the Board of Education of the Santa Barbara Unified School District on increasing school facility fees. Is there any public comment on this?
No.
Right, then I'm going to go ahead and close this public hearing on the adoption, on the increasing school facility fees, and move to the adoption of Resolution 2014/2015-04 of the Board of Education of the Santa Barbara Unified School District for increasing school facility fees. And Dr. Cash, I don't know if there's any comments that you want to add to this?
No, it's pretty self-explanatory, and the board's seen it previously.
All right, board members?
I'll move adoption of Resolution 2014/2015-04 of the Board of Education of the Santa Barbara Unified School District increasing school facility fees.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Herron, seconded by Dr. Paz. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that passed unanimously 4-0. Thank you very much. And we're going to move back to item H4. No, not H4, H3. We won't jump ahead of ourselves here. Ms. Wagenknecht, okay, Ms. Limon,
I
go
do
ahead and
have two
continue.
more questions. One is about family engagement. Is there family engagement? If so, what does that look like?
Year two, that's something we've worked on a lot, and it is part of the LCAP. One thing we're implementing is, the bigger picture is we're working with Padres Unidos to do ELAC parent training. So they'll be coming in, and our ELAC with La Cuesta and Alta Vista will be combined. But not all of our parents, it's appropriate for ELAC. So we are going to be holding quarterly cafecitos at each of the Quetzal sites. And if folks are not aware, I mean, cafecitos are what they sound like. Come and let's talk about the school and welcome the families. And so we'll be doing that quarterly at each of the...
With a cup of coffee?
What's that?
With a cup of coffee?
With a cup of coffee. And a little side something. And we would invite any of you to join us. We'll send you the dates, and it's just an opportunity to talk about the school. We'll be doing that at La Cuesta as well.
And final question has to do with cohort. So there's cohort models that we know could be successful in different educational kind of environments. Are there? Does this feel at all like a cohort, or are students really doing independent work?
No.
No cohort. Yes, independent.
No to students. Students are doing independent work, but does it feel like a cohort? If you walk in, and I invite those of you who haven't been to any of the Quetzal campuses, I'd be happy, I would love to take you around to all of them and visit. You get a sense of family, like they're working together. And we did have some issues in one of the classrooms that we took some steps to solve that issue. But the other three, it was always like the youth were working together, the teacher was part of that, and I mean, you can see when the records come out of our discipline issues, there weren't a lot that were outside of that one classroom where we did have a number of issues. But the feel's there. And the project-based learning, part of that is we don't work in isolation in the real world. And so the students in Quetzal will be working together on their project-based learning. And they almost, when you visit, and you've seen the West Side Neighborhood Center, they're small rooms. So you're either going to get along or not be successful. The rooms at La Colina are bigger, and at La Casa they have a little bit of room to spread out. But the interesting thing is, at La Casa, the teacher would always try to get them to move out into the bigger room where the whiteboard was, and they wanted to stay in the smaller room. There'd be like 11 adult-sized people in this small room. So I would say they are like a cohort, more than they are just individuals showing up and doing their thing and leaving. So.
Thank you.
Other board members? I have a few questions. And first of all, when El Puente was around, they had a lot of concerns about security and a very extensive security process. And I'm wondering, in this first year of Quetzal, have you had any issues? What are you looking at in terms of security, and has anything come up?
You know, we had, I'm trying to think if we had in that same one classroom that we've really addressed, we had some issues with verbal brawling. But in the other sites, we didn't. We had an issue where a kid was carrying he had a small knife on him. He pulled it out to show another student, and we addressed that in the way that we were supposed to, but it wasn't brandished. The blade didn't come out. But that's really it. We did not have a lot of discipline issues at all.
And an issue that we've always had on the board is when we have junior high students that were in the past up for expulsion, and really a distinct uncomfortableness, I would say, on the part of the board with the idea of placing them in El Puente where they didn't have a separate junior high space. And so can you talk a little bit more about your junior high students and how they've done? It sounds like are they completely in their own classroom on La Colina campus, or are they able to integrate?
They're integrated. We do not have and I don't know that we'd want to. That is a hard part. I mean, honestly, delivering an appropriate curriculum to 7th grader and 12th grader, and that's another reason, and with all their varying abilities and places that they are academically, it can be a struggle. But that's one reason why we moved towards project-based learning, was because you can write a project and differentiate it to 15 different students. The project, in essence, is malleable in that way. And that was one way to get around, I'm delivering the 7th grade ELA standards, and I'm delivering the 12th grade and the 9th. Yep. But the verdict's still out on that. We will see how this year goes. But that was part of it, was that every student could work on the projects in a way that was rigorous and appropriate for them.
Great. And my last question is something that Mr. Herron has brought up in the past, and that is the idea of your students who transition back to the traditional high schools and junior highs, but probably the high schools in particular. And that's, how do you have any role in monitoring them once they've gone back to one of the traditional high schools? How do we know that those students are going to get the support services they need in this large, comprehensive, and maybe this is something Mr. Turina can address, how do we know that your students are going to get what they need at a comprehensive high school? Are they tracked in any way?
We are not tracking. Not at this point. We're not tracking them. We have not had that many who have gone back. It is something we could work on. We do have a number going back now, here in the fall, because transitioning back to traditional mid-year, I think we had 2. But that's not something we're doing now, but we certainly could. And it's something that we should work with our traditional high school colleagues on. How are they going to get the type of support that they need in order to be successful? I think you're going to see that the vast majority of our students end up transitioning into one of the other alternative ed programs. The hard part is because La Cuesta serves 11th and 12th graders, any 9th and 10th graders who are credit deficient, I think that's that's an area that we should look at as a district on how we can do credit recovery and create a space, but that's not this year.
Okay.
But moving forward.
Mr. Herron.
I'd just like to say that, since I've been on the board, El Puente was not a happy conversation. And the fact that you've changed all that, and now it's a positive, is just a tremendous change for our district. So all you've done, I really appreciate, and your staff.
Thank you. And I appreciate that, and I don't want to come up here and say everything's perfect and rosy, because you all would know that that's not the case, but we're working on it. There's nothing that's insurmountable that we've experienced at Quetzal, and so I appreciate that.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Okay,
And
thank
we
you.
look forward to more updates, and knock on wood that
Anytime.
everything keeps going well.
Yes.
Thanks, Fran, great job.
All right, this brings us to H4, discussion of renewal of service agreement from Interquest Detection Canines for the 14-15 school year. Dr. Cash.
Well, there were so few questions regarding this, I thought we'd bring, I'm joking. So this is back before the board. The contract is up again for renewal, and we have prepared some data. Our new education data analyst is here with us, Ms. Guillermo Juan, and she has some data that she can share with you. Mr. Torina, I know, has a perspective as well, and we'll take questions from you, and if necessary, bring it back for action at the next board meeting.
All right, let's see the data and hear from Mr. Torino.
So I'd like to invite Dr. Guillermo Juan to come up and present the data regarding our drug interventions.
So you know that she's an alum. Okay, I just want to make that clear. All right.
Good evening, Madam President and members of the board. I'd like to present to you the data for drug-related offenses for the past 6 years, starting in 2008, 2009. And so if you could just go to the next page. Okay, so this report covers all drug-related offenses in Education Codes 4890C, J, and D. And those are related to controlled substances, drug paraphernalia, and sales of drugs and alcohol. And so because of the way that Ed Code is written, we were not able to tease out alcohol-related offenses from drug offenses, but these are the three that encompass drug offenses. And so this report is limited to data from Dos Pueblos High School, La Cuesta High School, San Marcos High School, and Santa Barbara High School due to the implementation of drug dogs at those sites starting in 2012-13. And data were selected if the incident occurred at each specific site to ensure that we did not duplicate counts. And so you will see, in general, there have been fewer reported offenses related to drugs and alcohol in some instances in the past 2 years. If you'll go down to the next one, this next graph shows the distribution of offenses for all offenses since 2008-2009 by racial group. And we see here that Latino students are overrepresented in all offenses across all the past 6 years. And here, this is the controlled substance offenses, and you'll see this is where most offenses occur, and you'll see that general trend where we have a higher number of offenses before the implementation of the drug dogs and lower after. And if you'll scroll down again. And again, we'll see an overrepresentation of Latino students in this particular offense category. The next one I want to show you in detail has to do with drug paraphernalia, and this is a little bit different. It's difficult to say if the trend is a little bit stagnant, but we don't see the same decline definitively in the last 2 years. If you can go down to the next one. We also see Latino students overrepresented in this drug offense category. And the last one. This is for the sales of drugs and alcohol, and we do see a drop in the past 2 years, particularly from 2008, 2009, as well as a peak in 2010, 2011. And this one, we don't see overrepresentation of Latino students. We see an equal distribution between Hispanic, Latino, and white students. I did want to point out that I didn't put on this graph here is that when we look at the representation of Latino students in the drug offenses, can you go actually to the very first one? Yeah. Down one, yeah, that one. In this one, in 2008, 2011, I guess let me say, years 1, 3, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Years 1, 4, 5, and 6, Latino students comprise somewhere between 62 and 65% of all offenses. In years 2 and 3, so 09, 10, and 10, 11, Latino students comprised around 72% of all offenses. And so if we think about this overrepresentation here, there's kind of this spike around year 2 and 3 of what I'm able to track by racial category. And the last 2 years are somewhat in line with 2008 and 2011-12. So I'll open it up for questions at this time.
Do you want to hear from Mr. Chirina first and then?
Or,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, part of the commitment for the board and for the district is to really create a safe environment and climate at our school. And I believe that part of that process was to bring the dogs onto the school and have it as a preventative measure. I know that some of the debate has been in regards to how much they can do and how much they've been detecting. There was a question that we, as far as has been reported, we've had no false hits, which means the dog signifying that there's a presence of marijuana that hasn't been vetted out to have some validity. And as far as the dogs being accurate, I think this year we had no hits at all this past year with drugs from the dog. The account for the 2 drug sales, those were actually created by other students and or community members reporting that to us instead of actually having an indication from our drug dogs. So welcome to any questions.
Mr. Herron.
Last year, when we renewed the contract, Dr. Cash, you indicated that the principals wanted it renewed. How do the principals feel this year?
Well, what the principals would like would be the opportunity to search all the backpacks. But since that isn't going to happen, the principals look for any opportunity to keep drugs off their campus. Any deterrent that does that, the principals are in favor of.
And second, how many times do they actually go through the parking lot versus just the classrooms? Or do they do parking lot every time they're on the campus?
Every visit that the dogs make to a high school campus, they will go through the parking lot.
And that's the student parking lot?
Student parking lot, yes.
Faculty parking lot?
I do not believe they go through the parking lot for the faculty.
So they go through the student parking lot. Thank you. So that's something they can't move. I mean,
right.
If it's in the car, so I mean that tells me something right there.
Well, and they also the schools learned quite quickly that they needed to close those parking lot gates when the dogs showed up. Any other comments or questions on this? I will just add that, of course, I've just had a high school senior, and I, absolutely asked him, is this having an effect with your peers? And he said, yes. So in terms of it being a deterrent, obviously I don't think it's actually declining drug use in any way, and or drug sales. They are just not happening on the school campuses. So thank you. Ms. Limon?
So my position has not changed, so you will likely see a dissenting vote. And I appreciate the data. I think the data is important. The data doesn't tell me that it's as a consequence of the drug dogs. And, for me, I think especially after watching the last few years, I think it continues to be a combination of a matter of principle of, I have a hard time. I feel like I see the expulsions that come our way, and drugs are still a problem. And so I would rather invest financial resources in having students stop using drugs than learn different ways to hide them. But I respectfully understand also the positions of colleagues. But I am not in support of renewing the contract.
Dr. Paz?
And I won't either. I think, when you look at all this data, it's great, but there's no causation. This is correlation at best. And anecdotal points that everyone is making, it's like, oh yeah, well, that's anecdotal. So for me to support this, I need to see some cause. There's no cause. And I feel likewise, as my fellow board member has said, it's even today when we're looking at the cases we were doing with student discipline, a number of them had to do with the issues we're talking about today. They're not going away. And I think when we look at the greater picture, deterrent is one thing, prevention is another. And I strongly believe that we need to focus on prevention and not just deterrence. And I still don't see that. And I think that overall, we still have work to do in that area. So my vote's not going to change.
Ms. Limon and then Mr. Herron?
Yeah, my vote's not going to change.
Oh, hold on a second, Mr. Herron. Let me have Ms. Limon go first, and then you.
Actually, if you want, because mine's going to be about something else related to the data, but go ahead.
Yeah, my vote's not going to change. I made the comment a year ago, if we're lucky and we have no hits, to me, that's success. And even though they can take the backpacks out, that's one thing. But the fact that we can look in the parking lots where might likely be stashed, that we have no hits there either. I can't help but think that having drug dogs possibility keeps people from bringing it on campus. And our parents and our students, in the majority, want to keep drugs off the campus. And if $13,000 or $14,000 helps accomplish that, which I think it does, I think if we can save one child, it's well worth that kind of money. Thank you.
Ms. Limon?
Well, and I want to make sure that I think that that's a goal for all of us, and I think that we just have different approaches to how we reach the goal. So I want to make sure that that doesn't distinguish us from each other in that way. But this data also spoke to disproportionality in identification. And so how does that come back to us? How do we think about that as a whole? That's just a whole other piece of, in some ways I've been following the restorative approaches and looking at our numbers change. It didn't seem like a whole lot of change here, though. So
We've got work to do. I mean, there's no doubt about it. In the area of cultural proficiency, we've got work to do.
Well, and the big question for me here is, the sort of elephant in the room is, are we searching backpacks of Latino students more often? Are we searching their things? Are we being harder than we are on white students? And I think that's something that we need to be very careful and something that we need to look at. I'll say my position hasn't changed either. I continue to be, compared to when I came on the board and the expulsion numbers that we saw then, I still think that this is, I know that there are multiple reasons why we have such a huge drop in the number of expulsions that we do, but I do think that this is, just one other piece that's being played in it. I'd be curious if in the messaging that goes out to students at the beginning of the year about the drug dogs, if there could be more that explains that the drug dogs will hit on paraphernalia, and that paraphernalia is called out as something that can be caught by the dogs, so that students have that in their minds when they think about what they're going to bring on campus. So that's just a wondering on my part when we see that those numbers are not the same as the other ones. Dr. Paz?
And I too am a little concerned about the overrepresentation. I think we've dealt with it. We're dealing with it in this particular case, but we've dealt with it in a number of other areas when we look at special education as one example. So I think we do have a lot of work to do, and this is just, as a overall issue that we as a board have to deal with. There is an impression still that exists in our community, whether it's our community or our schools, our teachers, our administrators, of a certain mindset about certain groups in our schools, and I think that needs to change.
Couldn't agree more.
All right, well, it sounds like this needs to come back to us. Mr. Herron?
Could we get a copy of this presentation?
Yeah, we'll post it on the website, and you'll all get an electronic copy.
Yeah, this is an example of something that could also obviously be attached to the agenda item, but also just go in the board brief.
Yeah, and I don't know if it would help me at all, but I know you have the bar graph, but could we get maybe a line graph also that shows the disparity between Latino and whites?
Yes.
I'd like to see how that has changed over time, or how it fluctuates.
Can I ask you one more question before you go away? Did you see a lot of disparity between the schools? I mean, we just looked at a district-wide.
We'll send you the individual school data.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to we don't need to go to consent agenda, consent items on the agenda. J, coming events. Gosh, the next time we meet, it will be the day before school starts.
Yes, Madam President.
Lots of stuff going on right now. And we heard about coming events from Dr. Cash at the beginning of the meeting. Future agenda items. Mr. Herron.
Going back to
Your mic.
coming events, maybe. Could we get a short schedule of what the professional development is next week, as to where it is, what it is, and
For the teachers?
for the teachers?
Yeah, you'll get it. You'll get a course catalog and a master schedule of everything, but it'll only be for the August 21st. Individual school sites will be doing their own professional development on the 22nd and 23rd.
Okay, thank you.
But you'll get that, absolutely.
Actually, I appreciate you bringing that up too, Mr. Herron. Back on coming events, if you haven't already gotten a notice yet, you will be getting a notice that they're doing a ribbon cutting for the Tatum Safe Routes to School on October 18th at 1:30 p.m.
Wow. That's good. I'm glad I wasn't aware of that.
So, and that's being organized by Supervisor Wolf's office. Okay. All right, any future agenda items?
I just have one thought. Today we approved the Renaissance Learning Program for another year. Do we have any sort of a short synopsis of how it has worked and what the results have been?
I've sent you periodically in the weekly board letter reports, particularly from two schools, Adams Elementary School and Lacumber Junior High, I almost said Lacumber Middle School, Lacumber Junior High School. But we'll gather that data district-wide if you'd like to see it. Would you like to see it broken down by school sites, or?
Just something simple. I don't want a lot of work, but just to show what has happened in the program. District-wide is fine as far as I'm concerned.
Will do. I think Dr. Guillermo Juan heard that.
All right, and Dr. Cash and I had been discussing about, in the near future, having a conference item just on drought updates and what's going on with the district and the drought. So that'll be coming. All right, well, if there is no objection, then at this point, I am going to go ahead and act item L, adjourn the meeting.
It's too early.